So it was the summer of 1976, and I was 16 and growing up in the Chicago suburbs. And I remember it was a good summer. The song on the radio was Thin Lizzy, The Boys Are Back in Town. And I went everywhere that summer barefoot, just because I think it was residual hippie holdover. And I wouldn't wear a shirt if I was walking outside if it was nice out. So anyway, I'm walking down the street and I'm in a bad mood because I'm going to see my girlfriend. And I knew that my girlfriend was going to break up with me. And that's everything in my head right then. And nothing else was as important as this. And so I was going to see her because I thought that's what you got to do. You got to do it in person. And I'm going to have my girlfriend break up with me. And then I see like a white Ford Econoline van. And the guy slows down. And it's an older man. It's a middle-aged man. He looked ancient to me. And he's kind of checking me out at first. That's what I thought he was doing. And so on top of that, I'm going, my girlfriend's going to dump me, and now this jerk is checking me out. What's with that? And then I had a second thought, which was, maybe he's lost. Maybe he's just looking for directions. And he kind of pulls up to me, and we kind of hit it off really quickly. It was interesting that one of the first things he said is, he goes, I could tell you're a good person. When I first looked at you, I saw you look at me like you were going to blow me off. But then he saw that second thought in my head, that maybe he's somebody who needs help. And he said, I can tell you're a good person because of that. And this grown man who's paying a lot of attention to me, and adults really didn't do that a lot with me when I was a teenager, because I was kind of shy. And so often if I advanced an opinion around adults, including my parents, it was like, no, he's just, he's just the wallflower. But it was just a friendly chat. He said, well, you're just standing out there. Why don't you sit down? So I get into the van with him and we start chatting, and he starts telling me about his life. And that was interesting, that an adult stranger would tell me about what he was doing. He talked about his construction company. And then we start talking about girls. And, and I told him that, my girlfriend was probably going to break up with me. And he talked about trying to understand women, and trying to read them. And to me, this sounded like great wisdom. So he said, like at his office, at his construction company, he knew that the receptionist was pregnant, and before she even knew. And he said he did that just by looking in her eyes. And I thought that was really perceptive, 16-year-old me. And we had been talking for a while before I thought to ask his name. He asked me my name first, and then I asked him his name, and there was a slight pause, but then he said, he's Harvey. And it was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, Harvey. And so he's talking to me, he's giving me his full attention, and I could see in his eyes, there was a light in his eyes. I'd never seen eyes so alive. And this impressed me. He had earlier told me, that he could tell that a woman was pregnant before she knew. And so I thought this guy had a lot of insight that normal people don't have. So Harvey was opening up to me, even things that were a little embarrassing. Like he told me as a hobby that he would entertain sick children at hospitals. That was his charity work. And then when he did it, he would dress up as a clown. And he kind of made a joke of it. Yeah, you can kind of see I'm a clown. We kind of chuckled. And he said, that he really got into other things. He's very much into amateur magic, which he also realized was kind of a dorky thing to do. But it made him kind of endearing. But he went back to his job, and he asked me about mine. And he knew that I was a cook at a pancake place, which was a standard kind of teenage job. And he said, is the money there any good? And I said, well, no, not really. And he said, well, you know what? Why don't you come work for me? Why don't you come work for my construction company? We'll show you the ropes and everything like that. And that sounded great. Maybe it was a break that I needed. I gave him all of my contact information. He said he was going to get back to me. I felt like I had made a real connection. Like, this is a setup. This could be the rest of my life. And he let me out of the van, and I went to my girlfriend's house. She broke up with me, and then I walked home. So I go home and I feel like I've got this ace in my back pocket that, Harvey's going to call me and we're going to talk about the job. But I didn't tell my parents about it. I tended not to tell my business to my parents. So we're all sitting at the dinner table, and my little sister Marnie wasn't there yet. The phone rang, and she picked up the phone. And then she comes to the table and says that I have a phone call from a grown man. And immediately, my father asks, why is a grown man calling you? So I start telling him the story about Harvey. My father is listening, and even as I'm telling the story to him, I realize there are things that don't add up. Chiefly that I was 130 pounds, and I'm not the kind of person you would have hired for a construction crew. I wouldn't have hired me to pick up a hammer. And so I'm getting a little more embarrassed. That was my main emotion at the time, is that I'm thinking, somebody kind of played me, and I didn't realize it. So once again, I didn't come up to snuff because I couldn't see what was going on. So my dad says, you can't take this job. You're not going to take this job. So I went upstairs to talk to Harvey on the phone to tell him that I couldn't take the job. And he made me feel really, really bad, like I was breaking up with him. He said, I thought we really had a connection here. And I just mumbled something, said I was sorry, and hung up. And then that's the last I heard of Harvey. I met my wife after college. We got married. We moved down to Central Florida in Orlando, where I was working for a TV station. And also, on the side, I made low-budget horror movies. I was approached by these producers. They're mostly based in Texas. They asked me to write a screenplay about girls disappearing on a college campus. But to understand it a bit better, I decided I got to do some research. So I went to the library, get a big stack of books on serial killers, and brought them home and started leafing through them. And you're reading about Henry Lee Lucas and Jeffrey Dahmer and all these people. And my wife got interested, and she was a psychology major. And so I would work nights, and during the night, she would be going through these books, reading stuff like that, and kind of freaking herself out. And I was sort of freaking myself out. And we began to talk about this, about these serial killers. And these books were like the very beginning of profiling them to see what traits were in common between serial killers. And I told her, well, I met this guy, Harvey, years ago when I was a teenager. And he was kind of like some of these things, but I don't think he was a serial killer. I think in retrospect, I think maybe he was turned on by me. Didn't occur to me when I was 16. And my wife pressed me for details. And so I told her, that Harvey was just this guy. He's kind of like these guys, but he's not those guys. And she said, no, he's the guy. She said, there's a guy in these books who had a construction company, and he would kill young men and bury them on the construction sites. He was based in Chicago. And I said, well, but this guy he was an okay guy. He entertained sick children in the hospital. And she said, yeah, as a clown. There's a guy here that they call the killer clown, who's based in Chicago. Then I said, well, but, he doesn't seem like that. He did magic tricks. She said, that's how he killed the boys. He said, hey, I can do a magic trick. And would put them in handcuffs. And then once they were immobilized in handcuffs, then he would kill them. So at that point, I realized that if my dad had told me, do not take that job, that it would have been the next step. That I would have met Harvey at a place of his choosing, that he might have said, hey, I know a magic trick. Here, I'll put these handcuffs on. And then once he had me cuffed, then my friend Harvey would have murdered me, because my friend Harvey was John Wayne Gacy.